It's a sweltering July afternoon in 2020, and Twitter is about to experience something unprecedented. One moment, everything's normal, people scrolling through their feeds, sharing memes, arguing about politics. The next? Well, that's when things get wild. Imagine checking your Twitter feed and seeing Elon Musk. Yes, that Elon Musk, making what sounds like the most generous or suspicious offer ever. Send me $1,000 in Bitcoin, and I'll send you back double. Deal's only good for 30 minutes. Below it, a Bitcoin wallet address just sitting there, waiting for deposits. But here's where it gets really interesting. This wasn't just happening on Musk's account. Within minutes, the same message started popping up everywhere. Apple's official account, Uber, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and even Kanye West. We're talking about accounts with hundreds of millions of followers combined, all suddenly transformed into what looked like cryptocurrency giveaway machines. Twitter's response? Complete panic. They did something they'd never done before. They locked down verified accounts entirely, preventing them from posting anything new. Imagine that, some of the world's most influential voices suddenly silenced. But here's the real kicker, the part that nobody saw coming. Behind this massive breach, this attack that sent one of the world's largest social media platforms into chaos, wasn't some sophisticated hacking group or nation-state actors. It was a kid, a 17-year-old from Tampa, Florida. Let me tell you about Graham Ivan Clark. Picture your typical high school student, except this one was showing up to Hillsborough High School decked out in designer clothes worth tens of thousands of dollars. We're talking luxury watches, high-end accessories, the works. His classmates couldn't help but notice, and honestly, who could blame them? In a public school where most kids were wearing regular clothes from the mall, Graham stuck out like a diamond in a box of rhinestones. His classmates were puzzled. If his family was wealthy enough for him to dress like a young tech mogul, why was he attending a public school instead of one of Tampa's prestigious private academies? But here's the thing about Graham. Whenever anyone tried to ask about his apparent wealth, he'd smoothly change the subject, like a magician redirecting your attention. He played it smart, using his mysterious wealth to build a circle of friends who'd help him with homework and tests. In return, he'd treat them to expensive outings and entertainment. But there was just one tiny detail his friends couldn't quite figure out. His family wasn't rich. In fact, they were decidedly middle class, maybe even struggling a bit. So how does a teenager from a modest background end up with the kind of money that would make trust fund kids jealous? Well, that story begins when he was just 13 years old, and trust me, it's way more complex than anyone could have imagined. Now, to understand how a teenager ends up hacking Twitter, we need to rewind to where it all began. Behind the designer clothes and expensive watches, there was a story that started with a familiar tragedy, a broken home. When Graham was 13, his parents' marriage crumbled. His father packed up and moved away, leaving Graham and his mom to fend for themselves. Like many single parents, his mother threw herself into work, trying to keep their heads above water. And Graham? Well, he found his own world, one made of pixels and possibilities. Enter Minecraft, that blocky virtual universe that might seem innocent enough. But here's where Graham showed his first signs of entrepreneurial, let's call it creativity. See, in the Minecraft community, there's this thing called a cape, a digital accessory that players wear on their characters. Think of it as the equivalent of a Supreme hoodie in the Minecraft world. With some of these virtual capes selling for hundreds of real dollars, Graham quickly figured out he could turn this virtual fashion into actual cash. He built up a reputation in the community, got people to trust him, and then, well, let's just say those promised capes never materialized after the money changed hands. At 13 and 14 years old, he was already running confidence schemes that would make seasoned scammers take notes. But here's the thing about Graham. He wasn't just content with taking the money. No, he had what you might call a flair for the dramatic. He'd brag about his schemes to friends and enemies alike.
Oh really, I don't care, because you're like 12.
I'm like 12, but I make more money than you.
Yeah, obviously.
You don't think you want me to show you my PayPal? You think I'm kidding?
It's
I
like
made
1K
5K
a
in the
month.
past month off Minecraft. Off Minecraft. Yeah.
It was like watching a teenage version of a true crime documentary unfold in real time. Except the protagonist was live tweeting his own crimes. This caught the attention of some Minecraft YouTubers, particularly one creator named Emic, who started posting warning videos about Graham. Think of it as the Minecraft community's version of a true crime expose. Emic gathered stories from Graham's victims, presented evidence, and tried to warn others. The community responded by banning Graham from numerous Minecraft servers. But Graham?
So Open ended up getting banned off of like all these servers after I showed the proof in my videos of how he was scamming. And then that is when I ended up getting hacked.
He didn't take kindly to being exposed. Remember those hacking skills I mentioned? He allegedly either hacked Emic's accounts himself or hired someone to do it. Then, in a twist of digital identity theft, he used those compromised accounts to scam Emic's own followers, selling fake Minecraft items under the YouTuber's trusted name. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. Graham had a whole portfolio of scams going, stiffing designers who made content for him, ghosting programmers after they built him custom servers, even creating fake, incredible moments in Minecraft by staging elaborate scenes with his friends. He was running a virtual con artist workshop before he could legally drive. Think about it. While most kids his age were worried about homework and school dances, Graham was orchestrating sophisticated digital fraud schemes. But this was just his training ground. These Minecraft scams, they were like practice runs, baby steps towards something much bigger. He was learning, evolving, and soon he'd take these skills from the pixelated world of Minecraft to something much more ambitious. Remember when I said Graham was just warming up with those Minecraft scams? Well, this is where our story takes a sharp turn into the darker corners of the internet. Enter OG Users, a marketplace that would make any cybersecurity expert lose sleep. Picture eBay, but instead of selling vintage collectibles, people trade usernames. You know those cool single-word Twitter handles like @game or @pool? That's what OG Users specialized in. On the surface, it marketed itself as a legitimate marketplace. But here's the open secret. Most of those coveted usernames, they were stolen by hackers from their original owners. These weren't just any usernames. We're talking digital gold here. Single-word handles could sell for thousands of dollars, and Graham wanted in on that action. But this wasn't just about buying and selling anymore. This was his gateway from small-time scammer to full-fledged hacker. Now, let me introduce you to something called SIM swapping, the digital equivalent of stealing someone's house keys, mail, and ID all at once. You see, most of our digital lives are protected by our phone numbers. Want to log into Twitter? You need a verification code sent to your phone. Forgot your password? They'll text you a reset link. It's supposed to be the Fort Knox of digital security. But Graham and his crew, they found the back door. Here's how SIM swapping works. In plain English, imagine calling your phone company and convincing them you're someone else, someone whose phone number you want to steal. If you succeed, that person's phone suddenly goes dark, and all their texts and calls start coming to you instead. It's like forwarding someone's mail to your address, except it's their entire digital life. But wait, you might be thinking, surely phone companies wouldn't just hand over someone's number that easily. Well, you'd be surprised. While I can't get into the nitty-gritty details, we don't want to write a how-to guide for hackers. Here's one example. A hacker might call a phone company pretending to be an employee from another branch. They'd use insider lingo, drop names, and sound like they belong. All they need is one tired or overly helpful employee to believe them. Once they have your phone number, they have the keys to your digital kingdom. Your email? They can reset it. Your social media? Theirs. Your Bitcoin wallet? Not anymore. And remember, Graham was pulling this off when he was just 15 years old. an age when most kids are worried about their learner's permit. But here's what makes this part of the story so crucial. This wasn't just about stealing phone numbers. This was Graham's education in social engineering, the art of manipulating people rather than machines. He was learning that the weakest link in any security system isn't the technology, it's the humans behind it. And this lesson, it would come in very handy when he set his sights on Twitter. Let me show you just how deep this rabbit hole goes. Remember that phone company scam I mentioned? Here's where it gets really clever and scary. Imagine you're a phone company employee and you get a call about an urgent issue. The caller directs you to what looks exactly like your company's internal website. The page asks for your login credentials to view an important alert. Seems legitimate, right? Except it's not. It's a perfect fake, created by hackers like Graham to harvest employee logins. Once an unsuspecting employee enters their credentials, they see a message saying the issue has been resolved. They hang up, thinking they've just handled another routine call. But in reality, they've just handed over the keys to the kingdom. The hacker now has employee-level access to the phone company's systems, allowing them to perform SIM swaps at will. But surely employees would catch on, you might ask. Here's the genius and terrifying part of it all. If one employee got suspicious, Graham and his crew would simply try another, and another, and another. It wasn't about technical brilliance. It was about persistence and psychology. As Graham would learn, humans are almost always the weakest link in any security system. Initially, Graham's target was simple: those valuable Twitter handles we talked about. But then he had an epiphany that would change everything. Getting access to someone's phone number meant access to their email. Access to their email meant access to, well, everything. But here's where Graham got really clever. He realized that traditional bank transfers were too risky. They leave a trail. But there was one type of money that was practically untraceable: cryptocurrency. Specifically, Bitcoin. Picture this. You're a crypto investor with millions in Bitcoin. Your phone suddenly stops working. By the time you realize what's happening, your digital fortune is gone. Transferred to anonymous wallets, bounced through dozens of accounts, impossible to trace. No insurance, no recovery, no recourse. This wasn't just theoretical. The crypto world was, and still is, plagued by these attacks. We're talking massive heists. $24 million here, $8.7 million there. Numbers that would make traditional bank robbers jealous. And the best part for the criminals? Once cryptocurrency is stolen, it's virtually impossible to recover. Let that sink in for a moment. A 15-year-old kid had figured out how to pull off multi-million-dollar heists without ever leaving his bedroom. Traditional bank robbers needed guns, getaway cars, and elaborate plans. Graham just needed a phone and an internet connection. Through the OG Users Marketplace, Graham wasn't just trading stolen usernames anymore. He was networking with a whole underground community of hackers. Think of it as a digital version of a crime family gathering, except instead of meeting in smoky back rooms, they were connecting through encrypted messages and forum posts. But Graham wasn't content with just being another crypto thief. No, he had bigger plans. Much bigger. He was about to take everything he'd learned about social engineering, everything he knew about manipulating systems and people, and use it to pull off something that would make these cryptocurrency heists look like pocket change. You know what's wild about these hackers? They didn't just pull off these heists, they flaunted their wealth like social media influencers. We're talking luxury cars, designer clothes, watches worth more than most people's yearly salary. All posted right there on social media, acting like they'd earned it through honest work. Graham watched and learned from all of this, seeing his own earnings skyrocket from thousands to hundreds of thousands and eventually into the millions. But here's where Graham got really methodical. Instead of random targets, he developed what you might call a digital hunting strategy. He'd spend hours scrolling through Twitter, particularly focusing on cryptocurrency exchange accounts and their followers. Think of it like a lion stalking its prey. He was looking for the perfect target, someone who wasn't just wealthy, but someone who couldn't resist showing off that wealth. And let me tell you, people make it way too easy. They're out there posting their real names, dropping hints about their massive crypto holdings, sharing details about their lives that they really shouldn't. It's like leaving your house keys under the doormat and posting a picture of exactly where you put them. Once Graham identified a target, he'd launch what hackers call a doxing operation. Think of it as building a complete digital profile of someone's life. Their real name, address, phone number, email, and countless other personal details. And here's the scary part. Most of this information isn't even hard to find. There are websites out there selling your personal data right now. Data you've willingly given to various services over the years. Every time you sign up for a website, that information might be for sale and you'd never even know it. Let me give you a real example of how this played out. One of Graham's victims, we'll call him Mr. X, was a successful businessman with significant Bitcoin investments. On April 15th, 2019, Mr. X was sitting in his office. Just another normal day at work. His phone was right there on his desk when suddenly, nothing. No signal. In a modern office building with usually perfect reception, his phone just died. When he tried to check his email accounts, they were all locked out. Wrong password, wrong password, wrong password on every single account. That's when the panic started to set in. In those few terrifying moments, Mr. X was beginning to realize he was under attack, but he had no idea just how bad things were about to get. Picture this. Mr. X frantically tried to access his cryptocurrency accounts. He'd been smart enough to spread his Bitcoin across 3 different platforms instead of keeping all his eggs in one basket. But it didn't matter. Every single account was locked. That's when the true horror of the situation hit him. He was completely cut off from his digital life. No phone, no emails, nothing. In a moment of clarity through the panic, he remembered something. A tracking app he used to monitor all his Bitcoin accounts in one place. With trembling hands, he opened it, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Right there in real time, he was watching his fortune disappear. Graham was draining his accounts, siphoning off Bitcoin worth about $1 million in one devastating sweep. But here's where it gets even crazier. That wasn't even all of Mr. X's crypto fortune. Graham could only steal what the platform's daily transfer limits would allow. It's like robbing a bank, but being told you can only carry out what fits in your backpack. Mr. X eventually managed to regain control of his phone and freeze his remaining crypto accounts. But the stolen Bitcoin, gone forever, bounced through so many anonymous wallets, it was like trying to track a single drop of water in the ocean. Now, you'd think stealing $1 million would be enough, right? But Graham got greedy. He wanted the rest of Mr. X's Bitcoin, the portion he couldn't steal because of those daily limits. And what he did next is just, well, it's almost unbelievable. Get this. Graham actually sent Mr. X an email from Mr. X's own email account. Talk about adding insult to injury. The message was pure extortion. Want your accounts back? Want us to leave you and your family alone? Send us 50 Bitcoin, worth about $250,000 at the time. Can you imagine the audacity? They'd already stolen $1 million, and here they were demanding more. But wait. It gets even better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. These criminals started fighting among themselves right there in Mr. X's email account. Turns out Graham had partners, 2 other hackers who helped pull off the heist, and he double-crossed them. He took the whole $1 million for himself and ghosted his partners, who were now reduced to arguing about their cut through their victim's email account. I mean, talk about honor among thieves, right? These angry partners were demanding their share, And they weren't being quiet about it. Their messages revealed that there were 3 people involved in the heist, but Graham had apparently gone dark on them, switched off his phone, and vanished with all the money. You know things are bad when thieves have to use their victim's email account to yell at each other about fair shares of stolen money. The betrayed partners weren't playing around. They threatened to expose Graham's identity to the police if he didn't give them their 66% cut. Pretty ironic, right? Here's this kid who started his scamming career in Minecraft, and now he's double-crossing other criminals. I guess you could say he was staying true to his roots, but this time he'd picked the wrong people to con. You see, unlike his previous victims, these weren't innocent crypto investors. These were dangerous people who knew how to play the same game. They started stalking him, looking for ways to hurt him. Let me share what some of Graham's friends from that period said.
A lot of people didn't like him because of some of the choices he made. So obviously that's going to come with some backlash. They got his family's personal info. They were just constantly harassing him. Someone sent people to Graham's house to scare him or even rob him at one point.
Well, they were planning his robbery. They wanted to have him tortured and a lot of dark things done to him.
Their identities were kept anonymous for obvious reasons. But here's where things take an even darker turn. Graham wasn't content with just digital crime anymore. He started dipping his toes into the real-world drug scene. We're not talking about anything too heavy. Mostly mushrooms, marijuana, and some pills. He wasn't just selling, he was using too, and building connections with some pretty sketchy characters. Then came the incident that would change everything. Late 2019, Graham got mixed up in something way over his head, a shooting that left one of his friends dead. Here's what went down. Graham and 2 other teenagers his age showed up at another drug dealer's house. They had a gun, and there was apparently some beef about money or debts. Graham stayed in the car while his 2 friends went in. What happened next was like something out of a crime movie. The dealer had his own gun and opened fire as soon as he saw them. One of Graham's friends was killed instantly. The other was seriously wounded. And Graham, he hit the gas and disappeared as soon as he heard the shots. When the police started investigating, they questioned the wounded teenager, which led them to Graham. His story? I was just the driver. They asked for a ride. I had no idea what they were planning. When I heard gunshots, I panicked and ran. Classic plausible deniability, right? But the investigators weren't buying it. There were too many holes in his story, too many contradictions. Still, they could only prove he was in the car outside, which wasn't enough for any serious charges. But that didn't mean Graham got off scot-free. His high school principal made the call. Anyone involved in the shooting was permanently expelled. Just like that, Graham's academic career was over. So what did our teenage hacker do? He moved out of his mom's house and got his own apartment. But there was still a major problem. But Graham's problems were far from over. The authorities weren't done with him. Their investigation was ongoing. And you know what made things worse? Graham was one of those hackers who just couldn't resist showing off on social media. See, in this digital criminal underground, there was this weird competition going on. Who could flaunt the most wealth? We're talking endless posts of luxury cars, designer watches, expensive bags, nonstop vacations, and wild parties. It was like Instagram meets Catch Me If You Can. The authorities were watching all of this, picking off these flashy young criminals one by one. Take one guy who called himself King. He stole about $7.5 million using the same SIM-swapping technique as Graham. Know where he is now? Serving 10 years in prison, throwing away his youth at age 21. When investigators started digging into Graham's finances, they knew something was off. The district attorney's office got involved, gathered enough evidence for a search warrant, and boom, they raided his place. What they found was staggering. 400 Bitcoin, worth about $4 million at the time. Talk about hitting the jackpot. This kid had been way busier than anyone suspected. Here's the crazy part. They had originally been investigating him for stealing just $1 million. Now they had evidence of $4 million, but could they prove where it came from? Remember what I said earlier about Bitcoin being untraceable? That became a huge headache for the prosecutors. Even the original million they knew about was hard to prove in court. After 8 months of legal back and forth, the DA's office made a deal. Graham would hand over $1 million of the seized funds, but he'd get to keep the other $3 million and walk away without any charges. Want to guess what Graham did? Took that deal faster than you can say Bitcoin. Why such a sweet deal? 2 main reasons. First, Graham was still under 18, and here's the kicker. You can't prosecute minors for federal crimes in America. The law just wasn't ready for an era where teenagers could steal millions while sitting in their bedrooms. Second, proving cryptocurrency theft is incredibly complicated, especially when dealing with a minor. So there he was, walking free with $3 million in his pocket. Everyone knew it was stolen money, but legally, nothing they could do about it. Now you might think this would be a wake-up call for Graham, a chance to turn his life around. You'd think getting away with $3 million would be enough, right? But that's not how Graham's mind worked. Being a minor had become his golden ticket, his get-out-of-jail-free card. And man, did he plan to milk it for all it was worth. But here's the thing. Time was running out. Fast. Picture this. It's mid-2020, and Graham's sitting on his millions, but there's this clock ticking in his head. In just 8 months, he'd turn 18, and his minor immunity would vanish. Most kids count down to their 18th birthday with excitement. Graham? He saw it as a deadline for his biggest heist yet. And boy, did he go big. On July 15th, 2020, Graham pulled off what would become one of the most infamous hacks in internet history. We're not talking about some random website here. He went after Twitter. Yeah, that Twitter. One of the biggest social media platforms in the world.
People between the ages of 13 and 25 who are living in their mom's basement, existing off Uber Eats, never leaving their homes, and all of a sudden, they're instant millionaires.
This story, several high-profile Twitter accounts appear to have been hacked.
Being called the biggest security incident in Twitter's history.
Let me paint you a picture of what happened that night. Imagine millions of Twitter users watching their feeds in disbelief as verified accounts of the world's most powerful people started posting one after another. We're talking the biggest names you can think of: Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Apple, Uber, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, even celebrities like Floyd Mayweather. In total, 130 high-profile accounts were compromised. The message? A classic double-your-money scam, but with a twisted Robin Hood vibe. I've decided to give back to the community. Send Bitcoin to this address, and I'll send you back double. Limited time offer, 30 minutes only. Sure, it sounds obvious when you read it now, but coming from the verified accounts of the world's most trusted figures, that hit different. Twitter's response was pure panic mode. They had to literally shut down tweeting capabilities for all verified accounts while they scrambled to figure out what was happening. But here's where it gets really interesting. A guy named Haseeb Awan, who ran a cybersecurity firm specializing in preventing SIM swap attacks, got a cryptic message from someone in the hacker community. Twitter's gonna be fun today. When Haseeb pressed for details, he learned that a group had somehow gained the ability to take over any Twitter account they wanted. The source? A notorious forum called OG Users, where people trade social media handles like baseball cards. Someone using the name Chaywan was openly advertising the ability to hijack any Twitter account for $2,000, $3,000. Haseeb tried to warn everyone by tweeting about this, but within minutes, he got a DM that sent chills down his spine. Please delete your tweet. I don't want people thinking I'm the bad guy here. The story was just getting started. The plot thickened when Chaywan started talking to Haseeb. Get this. The guy was practically sweating through his messages, desperately trying to convince Hasib he was just a middleman in this whole Twitter chaos. Hasib, being the clever cybersecurity expert he was, saw an opportunity. He connected Chaewon with a journalist, saying, "Look, they're gonna find you anyway. Better tell your story now on your terms." And boy, did that open the floodgates. Chaewon turned out to be a 19-year-old kid from England named Mason, and he was scared out of his mind. During his interview, he spilled something huge. He'd been working with someone named Kirk on Discord, who claimed to be a Twitter employee. Now that's where things got really interesting. Mason explained how he tested Kirk's abilities. "Show me you can get the handle anxious in Arabic." It was the kind of username that should have been impossible to get. But within seconds, Kirk delivered the goods, username and password, just like that. That's when Mason knew he was dealing with the real deal. But here's where we need to circle back to our friend Graham. Remember him? The kid who just walked away with $3 million and was racing against his 18th birthday? Well, just days after that sweet deal with the authorities, he and a 15-year-old tech prodigy, whose identity is still unknown to this day, set their sights on Twitter. Their timing? Perfect in a twisted way. It was 2020, peak COVID lockdown. Twitter, like every other major company, had sent their employees to work from home. This meant thousands of Twitter staff were accessing internal systems from their personal computers. A hacker's dream scenario. Graham and his young partner did their homework. They compiled a list of Twitter employees and their phone numbers. Then they started making calls, posing as Twitter IT support. Their secret weapon? Confidence. Pure, unwavering confidence. When you're pretending to be corporate IT, sounding like you belong there is half the battle. Here's where things got really devious. Graham and his young partner created perfect replicas of Twitter's internal login pages. When their targeted employees entered their credentials, thinking they were just doing routine security checks, they were actually handing over the keys to the kingdom. But here's the thing about Twitter's security. Not every employee has access to everything. They needed to climb the corporate ladder, digitally speaking. Think of it like a video game where you keep leveling up. With each employee account they compromised, they gained more access, more permissions, more power. They kept working their way up, jumping from one account to another, like stepping stones leading to their ultimate prize, an administrator account with God mode access to every Twitter account on the platform. But here's the ironic part. For all their technical brilliance, these kids had the business sense of, well, kids. They had control of accounts belonging to the world's most powerful people and companies. And what did they do? Run a Bitcoin scam and try to sell cool usernames. They could have manipulated stock markets, exposed celebrity DMs, or caused global chaos. Thank goodness they were more interested in quick cash than world domination. The party didn't last long, though. By July 31st, 2020, just 2 weeks after the hack, the feds came knocking. Someone had left a digital breadcrumb. Maybe a phone number, an email, an IP address? Something that led right to them. But even facing justice, Graham's crew couldn't take things seriously. During his first court hearing on Zoom, thanks, COVID, his friends crashed the call pretending to be journalists. They played music, made jokes, and even streamed inappropriate content.
So again,
Hello, Your Honor. Can you hear me?
on that Remy pack.
Please
Can you hear me, Your Honor?
inquiries through Mike Moore, our
Yo, Your Honor.
Sorry, I'm removing people as quickly as I can.
Treating one of the biggest cybercrime cases in history like it was just another day in their favorite video game. Reality hit hard, though. The prosecutors weren't playing around. They hit Graham with 30 criminal charges, threatening up to 210 years in prison. Initially, he played tough and pleaded not guilty. But 7 months of court proceedings can change anyone's mind. Here's where Graham got lucky one last time. He struck a plea deal that would let him be tried as a minor under Florida's young offenders law. Instead of centuries in adult prison, he got 6 years in juvenile detention. Plus, and this is the kicker, remember those 300 Bitcoin he still had stashed away? While he's serving his time, their value has tripled from $3 million to $9 million. Talk about failing upward. The kid's getting richer while doing time. Some people just can't lose, even when they lose. And that's the wild story of how a teenager hacked Twitter, caused global chaos, and somehow managed to come out ahead. Just remember, sometimes the biggest threats to global security aren't sophisticated hacker groups or foreign governments. Sometimes they're just bored kids with too much time and talent on their hands.